They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world, very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
A big question has risen. What's the real motive of US President Donald Trump's threat to launch a military operation in Nigeria? Well, Trump said his mission is to stop the alleged persecution of Christians amid widespread insecurity in the West African country. But experts say there is more to it. Now, some US politicians and experts are suggesting the establishment of an emergency US military base in Nigeria's oil-rich region of Niger Delta to tackle alleged massacres of Christians by Boko Haram terrorists. In a social media post on November 2nd, an advisor to Donald Trump and the co-secretary general of the Transatlantic Parliamentary Group, Dr. Walid Faris, claimed that establishing a U.S. base in Port Harcourt, the headquarters of Nigeria's oil-rich resources, will help deter Boko Haram. Port Harcourt in southern Nigeria is almost 1,370 kilometers from Maiduguri, the epicenter of Boko Haram violence. This has sparked curiosity. Is it all about alleged Christian persecution or U.S. interests in Nigeria's resources? Apart from oil in the south, Nigeria has vast reserves of critical minerals, including gold, lithium, and cobalt, mainly in northern and central parts of the country, where insecurity is widespread. The Trump administration has never hidden America's hunger for critical minerals outside its shores and is often accused of arm-twisting countries for economic and migration deals. In July, Nigeria rejected pressure from the Trump administration to accept third-country deportees, particularly Venezuelans from the U.S. Back to the alleged Christian persecution in Nigeria. It's widely known that armed groups carry out attacks indiscriminately, targeting Muslims and Christians. This isn't the first time Donald Trump has alleged genocide in an African country. In May, he claimed that the South African government was committing a genocide against white farmers, falsely showing photos from the DRC conflict to visiting President Cyril Ramaphosa in Washington to back his widely discredited claims. There have been tensions between Pretoria and Washington over trade and South Africa's ICC case against the ongoing Israeli war on Gaza. Some analysts say Trump's claims on African countries could also be a tactic to divert attention from the US-backed Israeli genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, which he never admitted.
United States President Donald Trump has threatened military action in Nigeria over claims of Christian killings. In a social media post, Trump says the U.S. will immediately cut off all assistance to the African country if the killings are not stemmed. The social media post comes a day after Trump announced that Nigeria will be added to a list of countries of particular concern set up to monitor religious persecution around the world. The Nigerian government has vowed to keep fighting the violent extremism, and it says it hopes Washington will remain a close ally. Let's speak now to Newsroom Africa's international correspondent, Simon Marks, live for us in the US this evening. Simon, good evening to you, our time. President Trump is threatening to get into Nigeria, guns blazing, quote unquote, there. Firstly, we know Nigeria has been struggling with Islamist extremism. Boko Haram is one group that has become very notorious over the years. But what kind of detail did President Trump put forward, and also why now? The timing of all of this.
Well, it's a very interesting question, Golly. I mean, in terms of the detail, if you were a core supporter of President Trump's Make America Great Again movement and you suddenly read this posting on his social media account yesterday, you would have been left scratching your head because, let's be honest, nationally here in the United States, there is very little coverage of what is taking place in Nigeria. However, it is absolutely evident that there are concerned Christian American, particularly evangelical Christian communities here in the United States that have been surfacing this issue. And this social media posting from President Trump follows intervention by one of his top allies on Capitol Hill, Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who has accused the Nigerian authorities of turning a blind eye to what he calls a massacre of Christians in the country. And Donald Trump, in this social media post, absolutely embraced that very binary understanding of what is taking place in Nigeria. He described Nigeria, the president, as a now disgraced country, said that if the government there continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately cut all aid and assistance to Nigeria. He vowed to wipe out completely the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities, and said that he has instructed what he now calls the Department of War, the old Department of Defense here, to prepare for possible action. He said that if military action begins, it will be fast, vicious and sweet. And he said the Nigerian government should consider itself under warning. The Nigerian government, he said, better move fast, or else, he implied, military action is going to begin. And of course, what is so complex in all of this is that the president and other Republican lawmakers here are presenting this as binary, whereas, as we all know and understand, in fact, if you look particularly at the violence in northern Nigeria, the vast majority of the people being killed are of the Islamic faith. Christians, of course, are also being killed in parts of Nigeria. But this is not a binary issue, Islamic terrorists slaughtering only Christians in Nigeria, as the president is suggesting. And it does make you wonder, Golly, is this the beginning of Nigeria finding itself on the receiving end of the same kind of rhetoric that South Africa has found itself on the end of throughout this year? You know, with the President of the United States making foreign policy decisions on the basis of a lack of nuanced understanding of what is actually taking place in the country.
Simon, you bring up those two parallels, South Africa and Nigeria. The only difference is that this time the US president is not offering any charter planes to move out the Christians and take them in a safe zone to the US. And one more thing, Simon, and that is that Nigeria is rich in oil. Are we making too much here? Could there be US interest in that regard, or are we really clutching at straws?
Well, I don't think we're making too much at all. I mean, it is extraordinary to see the President of the United States taking to social media and threatening military action against any nation in Africa, much less Nigeria, clearly one of the leading economies in the continent. And so I think that there are all sorts of questions about what is the motivation here. With regard to the refugee issue, we only learnt last week in a filing that was lodged on the US government's Federal Register that President Trump is indeed going to restrict the number of refugees that are allowed to enter the United States to a maximum of 7,500 per year. That's down from 125,000 during the last year of Joe Biden's presidency, and it's even lower than the number of refugees that Donald Trump allowed to enter the United States when he was president and the COVID-19 lockdowns were in place. And, as you know, in that disclosure on the Federal Register, the government here says that most of those 7,500 spots will be reserved for Afrikaners. The government here continuing to believe and argue that they are having their farms expropriated by the government of President Ramaphosa without compensation, even though that hasn't happened, even though the South African government and others have spent months trying to push back against the misinformation that lies at the heart of President Trump's policy towards South Africa. Now, there is an opening in the language that the President's disclosure in the Federal Register used last week that could allow him to open America's doors to Nigerian Christians, because he has already said that he doesn't want the policy to be viewed as a policy for white refugees only, even though there's copious amounts of evidence to suggest that is the intent behind it, including documentation that's been furnished by the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department to the White House. But he could allow Nigerian Christians in to America, saying that they're victims of persecution, but would he allow persecuted members of the Islamic faith in Nigeria who have been on the receiving end of that communal violence into the United States? That's a very big question for the White House.
Donald Trump has threatened to carry out attacks inside Nigeria because of too much purported killings of Christians. Therefore, the US president has instructed the Department of War to prepare for possible actions in Nigeria. The US has also warned that they will immediately cut off any kind of assistance towards Nigeria if they continue allowing this persecution against Christians. The US also added that this time, if Nigeria fails to handle the ongoing violence against Christians, they will go into Nigeria guns blazing and completely wipe out all the Islamic terrorists who are committing these atrocities against Christians. The US leadership also added that the attack will be fast, vicious, and sweet, the same way those terrorist attacks attacking Christians. The US warned again that the Nigerian government better move fast. If not, they're going to get it the hard way, because this is won't be a joke. So we have a number of African countries which are facing religious conflict in a similar way. That is Ivory Coast. We also have Mali since 2012. We also have Burkina Faso since 2015. We have Niger, which is facing Boko Haram from the southeast and Muslim extremists spilling from Mali and Burkina Faso from the west back into Niger. We also have other West African countries facing religious conflict over these, like Chad and Cameroon. Now the question is, why only Nigeria now? We also have the Central African Republic, which had interreligious conflict war since 2013. We also have Ethiopia, which apart from the Oromo and Amara war, they also conflict between Christian dominated government under predominantly and rebel groups. And not forgetting also Sudan, which has a history of devastating wars with significant religious dimensions, which includes the law conflicts between Muslim North and the Christians enemies from the South. So the question is still remain, why only Nigeria? Because other African countries as well need such help. Look at Sudan. Now, the US claims that there is Christian genocide going on in Nigeria, while experts and humanitarian analysts, on the other hand, claim that there is no Christian genocide going on in Nigeria, adding that the US leadership is just amplifying the situation in a way that it is going to divide and increase instability in Nigeria. Furthermore, Nigerian authorities claim that armed groups in Nigeria have been targeting both Muslims and Christians because they bomb schools, markets, churches, gatherings, everywhere, because they do not discriminate between Muslims and Christians. They just hit randomly. So Nigerian says that if the US is to come in, they are welcome so they can both identify and fight a common enemy, not the Islam extremists who are killing Christians. Now, another question here is that how did the US manage to see that Christians were being persecuted inside Nigeria without the Nigerian authorities realizing that Christians were being killed inside the country which they are living? You can answer that question the way you want. So Nigerian leadership says that they have welcomed the US in Nigeria, especially their military assistance. But the wrong thing is that if the US invades Nigeria and overrides the authority of Nigerian government, then if they do that, the result will be counterproductive. That is according to Nigerian government. Now, according to Nigerian authorities, there is nothing like Christian persecution in Nigeria. And according to them, the government is just addressing a general security challenge which affects citizens across all faiths and religions. Now, people from Nigeria, you are in a better position to agree, support, or refuse these claims from your government, because your government has put it clear that Nigeria opposes religious persecution and it does not encourage it. And they also said that Nigeria is a country of constitutional guarantee to protect citizens from all faith. And according to Nigerian government, they will continue to defend all citizens irrespective of race, creed, or religion. Now, remember, religious conflicts in Nigeria has lasted for more than 72 years, because these conflicts began as early as 1953. It can even be much earlier, from 1940s to date, but the US has come to see it now. Also, what you should know is that Nigerian Muslims, all 46% of Nigerian North, while Nigeria owns 46% of Nigerian South. So, this is my spotlight towards the US intervening in Nigeria. Look at it this way. How many countries with conflicts have ended up solving their problems after the US intervening? If you look around and get the picture, then you can agree or disagree with me that the US planned intervention in Nigeria is right or wrong. And I also believe that no one offers to help without expecting anything in return. And idiomatic law clearly says that someone may appear to be helping you with one hand, but taking with the other hand. Nevertheless, Nigeria is rich in oil, gold, zinc, Olumbai, and so on. So anything is possible and nothing is impossible in this situation. I hope you're thinking the way I'm thinking. So personally, I believe that conflicts, especially interreligious, can easily be stopped in Africa without an armed struggle. It is only that poor governance and weak states also contribute to such conflicts because of lack of socioeconomic development, and corrupt politicians in various countries makes parts of the population enter into radical ideologies as an alternative to secure maybe government that has failed to deliver. And unemployed young men in Africa also get into this kind of things, become vulnerable into being recruited to this religious extremism because they have nothing to lose when rebel group come, and before you know it, the country has exploded. Let us wait and see what transpires in Nigeria in the days to come. I'm going to ask you to subscribe to this channel if you're watching me for the first time, and for the returning subscribers, I really do appreciate you coming back and back again. Don't forget to tune in all the times. Until next episode, peace be with you.